Welcome back to Frequency of Fatherhood Summit. Guys, we have Brad Dunn, the CEO of Reliant Fitness here. Welcome, Brad. I appreciate you being here, man. Before we get into the weeds here, can you tell us a little bit about how you got into coaching, man, and how this has become a big passion for you?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, thank you for the opportunity. I'm pretty excited to be here and be able to share my experience, and hopefully it resonates with other men and they can decide to make big changes in their life. But the reason I kind of stepped into the coaching aspect, and the reason I get so much joy and fulfillment out of it is, I went through the process basically to correct my own life and my own lifestyle. I was unhappy with who I was and how I looked and how I felt and where my life was. So I did something about it. You know what I mean? I made a drastic change for myself and my family. And, basically going through that change and that transition and bettering my life, like now I get to basically give that gift back, basically teach people how I did it, what worked for me, and then guide them through the process. Because that's the problem with a lot of people is they want to make change and they're not happy with where they're at, but they don't know where to start. And I mean, most of us, it's hard to fathom at first, but we have to start with ourselves. We can't fix our problems in our life without fixing ourselves.
Absolutely. I cannot agree more. It does start with self and not looking outside 100%. And we're going to jump right into fatherhood then and how this has gone hand in hand with you because in fatherhood, as you know, I most fathers that look successful have worked on themselves first and then have that ability to offer it to their kids. So could you share some experiences that highlight the importance of character in fatherhood and its impact on your relationship with your children?
Yeah. I mean, our kids, ideally follow in our footsteps, right? So setting them up for success is our job as a father. So in order to lead properly, you should be leading by example. You set the tone, you lead by example, you do the things that you want them to do because they may not always listen to you, like follow your instructions, but they will always choose to follow in your actions. So, I mean, I had to remove a lot of things from my life so that my son wouldn't end up like the man that I was, because that's not what I want. And same thing with my daughter. Like I didn't want, the man who I used to be, that's not the man I would want my daughter to seek out, So that was really the big kicker for me to, hey, wake up, straighten it out. This is bigger than just you, and really make and seek change in your life for the better, to set my children up for the long-term success, basically build these fundamental habits and this lifestyle that they see, and now it's just to them it's normal, because I know a lot of us on here are our primary, objective at first is fitness and nutrition, but it's like I even remember as a kid like seeing my dad work out like on a very regular basis. I'd roll out of bed in the morning and he would be either in the garage, moving some weights or on his life cycle in the bonus room watching a football game or some pre-recorded football show. So like that was already pre-programmed into my mind, and even with my son now who's 8, he always asks me, "Oh, Dad, like, did you go to the gym this morning? Are you working out at home or the gym today?" So he already knows like it's going down. It's just a matter of if it's at home or if it's at the gym. So it's that programming, you know what I mean? Like this is life. This is part of life. Exercise, eating healthy, being strong and masculine. This is our job.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to bring up one thing that you mentioned there that I really love. And I think a lot of men don't talk about how we are a role model for our kids. Like our character is going to fall on them, right? It's kind of like their foundation. And what
Mhm.
you said there about your daughter, how important is that? She's going to look for men that resemble dad, that have
Right.
the dad's traits. So wouldn't we want to be the top tier for our daughters just to say, hey, this is what you deserve. You don't deserve less than dad, you know?
Totally. Totally. And that's like, that was it, because this all, I mean, when I really like buckled it all in and really went all in on myself and taking it super seriously, it was the last several months up until my daughter was born, and that was kind of the final kicker. Like, okay, like I really need to set the tone now. Like, I've built a decent foundation for my son, but I can be better, and now I'm having a daughter, and I just really wanted to come correct, you know.
Yeah, I totally get that. And for your son, I want to ask one last question here. When he was born, what did that do to you for your change? Because I know when I looked at my son when he was born, I cried like I never cried in my life. Like I couldn't control it, and I knew I had to change. I had to become the better man because I couldn't be the man I was because he had to leave for me to set the tone going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I'll never forget it, man. I mean, my when I found out I was having a son, and the day my son was born was like monumental in my life. But I'll also admit, like, I was still a very weak individual at that point in time. I was very selfish, and I prioritized the wrong things. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I love my son to death, and I will always be proud of him and always be there for him. But I mean, I was 25 years old. I was still, I was in a toxic relationship. So I was like, I don't want to say checked out, but it still didn't feel real to me. You know what I mean? And I mean, obviously, I knew it was my kid, but like, I didn't understand the responsibility and the impact that my decisions would have on him at such a young age, you know. Um, yeah, and then 2 weeks after my son was born, basically, I had, like, my highest high and my lowest low, like, back to back. Like, my son was born, and then 2 weeks later, my dad dropped dead out of nowhere. So I was, like, devastated, and, in all, it fucked me up, man. I was torn up for a while, and that was kinda the the tailspin of my demise, so to speak, for a little while, for some years, where I didn't know how to deal with it. So I basically was drinking myself to a point of being numb, and then fortunately I was able to just become I through decisions and through life and having children and being a father, I just decided, like, this enough is enough, like, I can be in pain and I can be broken, but I can also work to fix myself. I don't have to stay in this state.
Dude, that's huge. I mean, that shows how much character you had to rebuild. I mean, you reset the entire foundation. It sounds like to me after your son was born, losing a dad, losing parents is horrible. I mean, I felt it in my 20s, so I lost both parents early, and
Mhm.
I couldn't imagine in my 30s that happening at all or late 20s because I mean that was already so hard in my early 20s. If I got 10 more years, it would have just made it more difficult. I think. And I did the same thing. I went to alcohol, drugs, womanizing. I was
Yep.
spinning right down into jail pretty much. I was getting pulled over all the time, and I ran from the cops a few times. It was a bad person, but it was a hurt person who didn't have any leader to help guide him. I didn't have a father to guide me. I didn't have a mentor. I had nothing, and I went internal and just drank it all away and drug. Yeah.
Yep. And it's crazy how common of a theme that is, like getting into this coaching space where I'm talking to a lot of people, a lot of men, and that's just like, it's almost a normality, like, oh, like, something happened in their life, and that's just how they deal with it, and they just never crossed their mind to come correct and try to solve it, and that's what we try to do, is basically remove that pain and focus on, hey man, like, life is worth living, and you can make your life a lot better by practicing these, 3 4 5 things every day, and just setting yourself on the right track. And it's super powerful, and I got guys on my program that I've only been working with for a few months, and they've like completely removed alcohol, completely changed their lives just from, like that, like removing those toxic habits and implementing healthier habits, like day in and day out, and finding that commitment, because they were already putting that that energy and that drive into something. It was just a negative outlet. So as soon as they fucking have that positive outlet to put that same drive and that same consistency and energy into, they like just take off, and it's super rad to see people do that, like completely change their entire life in a matter of a couple of months.
Yeah, no, it's super impressive, and I've seen some of your outcomes, and it's absolutely impressive, brother. And you know, that brings up the question number two I was going to ask you is how do you navigate the balance between fostering independence and simultaneously nurturing your child's character growth? But the same thing is how do you offer that independence to the men that you're working with, because once you get them going, it's on them. So we kind of have like a
Right.
two-part question here with you bringing it to your children and to the people that are underneath you working with you.
Yeah. No, and I mean, I kind of do it the way that, my dad did with me. My dad was never the kind of guy that's like, you have to do this and you have to do that. Like I was never like given orders, you know what I mean, per se. I just was kind of like observed from a distance, like, and if I started to like go off kilter, like in a certain direction too far, he'd be like, hey, like rope me back in, and that's kind of how I do it if I can. Obviously, with my kid, I don't want to be that like that term like helicopter mom or helicopter dad where you're just hovering over them all the time. You're like, do this, do that, do this, don't do that. It's like I give my son a lot of freedom. But I also expect him to listen to me when I tell him to stop or to not do that anymore, and praise him when he does something good. And I do the same thing with my clients. Like you said, it's very much on them at that point, because these are adults versus children obviously need a little bit more guidance, a little bit more hands-on. But when you're dealing with grown men and women, you set them up on this, hey, this is basically what you need to prioritize in your life for the next 90 days, 6 months, 1 year, you know, and then it's on them to follow through and check in with me periodically. Like right now, I do like 2 Zoom calls a week where they can check in with me on a rotating basis. Um, but it's the same thing, you have to kind of rope these people in if you feel like they're straying away from the flock or from the foundation too much. Um, and I support, independence and people going out on their own. And it's a wide variety of people, because some people need their handheld. Some people need that like constant, like, hey, where you at? Where you at? Like, how's everything? And then other guys I deal with, like, I give them, and that's why I love working with like fire, military, law enforcement, because I just give them what I expect, and then they're like, understood, like right to it. But some of these other people that haven't had that same structure in their life before, they need their handheld, and they need a little extra push and check in here and there. So I try to offer that the best I can.
Yeah, I like that, and I agree. I'm kind of similar with the right and left limits, is what we always say. And again, very military, we always talk right and left limits, right? You can work within these limits, and I'm not here to babysit you, but here's your right
Mm-hmm.
limit, here's your left limit. So I really love that approach. And same thing with the frequency of fatherhood. We have a lot of prior military because my partner and I, the co-founders, are both military guys, and it just so happened like we attracted all these military guys, and way easier, much smoother transitions. But those the guys that are really going through struggles, the civilian sector, it's amazing to watch how much faster they transform though. And
Oh
so for
yeah.
me, I'm watching this as like newly out of the military. I'm not mentoring all the soldiers anymore where they have to kind of do it, right? Because I was their boss. And now it's like it's up to the civilian to do it themselves. And watching it is really, really inspiring. I mean, it just inspires me every single time I see a new man just step up and him see that he has it in him, that it's
Mm-hmm.
always been in him. He's taking his power back. And that's what I'm always preaching is that, guys, you need to take your power back because you've given it away too long in every single aspect of life.
Yep. Yeah, and that's the thing is like people don't realize that how empowering it is to like get your entire life in order, be physically fit and be healthy, because I think where a lot of people forget is you have to be proud of what you do, but it's hard to be proud of what you do if you're not proud of like who you are. If you wake up every morning and you look in the mirror and you're just like, fuck, but if you build that man that's like, hell yeah, like I look good, I feel good, it's hard for you not to just dominate in life because you already have that edge, and that edge has gotten so worn down over the years. Like, so like people standing up and taking it, like that's exactly what they're doing is they're taking the power back in their life.
Yeah, 100% agree with that too. It's you know, there's many roads we all have to go on, and the first road starts with self, as you first said, and building that confidence. And once you get that confidence, harnessing it and moving it forward down your own lane, right? So that's going to take me to my third question for you, and we're going to get
Yeah,
back to fathering here again, because I like hitting both right here, Brad, because it's so important for men to see that a lot of things that we're doing with our children, we actually do with our clients, what we do with
totally.
other men. And it's not like I'm changing my entire style for my son. It's just who I am. So
Mhm.
my next question to you is, how do you teach the important values such as empathy, integrity, and responsibility to your children in their everyday life?
I mean, that's kind of a hard one to answer, man. That's a that's a big question. I mean, and it kind of just goes back to the same thing, like lead by example. I try to be empathetic where I feel it's necessary. I try not to lose my temper where, like something would normally try to get me to come unglued because your children see those reactions in you and then they just think that that's normal. So I used to have a really hard time with that because I had like really short temper and this and that, and I would like blow up over like the littlest stuff, and finally like my chick kind of checked me, you know what I mean? Because I'd be like, well, he's doing this, like talking about my son, and he was a toddler. He's like 3, 4, 5 years old, and basically she basically put me in check and like, well, he's 5 and you're 30, so grow the fuck up. And I'm like, all right, I get it. Like, all right, you know. So it's kind of that same thing, like just having to lead by example and be that leader, like and like within the fire service, the guys that I always respected the most were the guys that were always calm and collective and very precise with the words they chose and the actions they took. So as much as I still sometimes have that like in me, I have to be like, okay, what would Chief so and so do? What would Captain so and so do? Like in a 3 to 5 second span, and try to get everything under control so that my kids can see that I've become calm and calculated and precise with my actions and my reaction. Um, and as far as like character, I mean, same thing, man. It's being that man that you want your kids to grow up to be, in a sense.
What you're making me think of there is how we all preach it. We all preach, and you're going to know exactly consistency, right? When
Hmm.
we're consistent, we kind of just hand those values down. And when they see us being empathetic, especially dad, it's hard for us because my wife, a lot of times she'll just say, "You're too much of a soldier." Right. Even my partner says it because he was Navy. He's like, we don't even know if that's military yet. And, and so like he'll often be like, I'm too much of a soldier. So a lot of times I have to check myself too and just stay consistent on how I'm being empathetic, because that's a part of me that was not a given skill. It's one that I have to continuously work on. And I think when
Yeah,
we bring stuff to our conscious, we're able to continuously work on it and make sure, especially in front of our children, we step that up. So
yeah, totally. Another thing that really helped me too, and I know that this is kind of selective and case specific, but my daughter, like having a daughter definitely like softened me up in certain areas that I never thought that I was going to be softened. And I was, for a long time, I was like that typical dad that treated my son like I've treated him like he was 13 from the time he was 1, and there's good and bad things that go along with that. But even just having my daughter, who's basically 14 months old, she's made me a lot softer and a lot calmer in areas where I used to just be like, well, what the hell, man, and it sounds like, okay, like come here, like you're still just like a little kid, this and that. So yeah, having a daughter definitely softened me up in certain areas and taught me a lot more patience and calm and collectiveness in certain areas.
Yeah, our next kid, I love that because our next kid, my wife just keeps saying over and over, she's like, we're gonna have a daughter. You're gonna become a softie. And you're gonna forget about all the roughness with our son. My son just wants to fight all day and play all day. And I'm all about that. I could go work out at 5 in the morning, crush a
Mhm.
workout, and still have all the energy in the world to play with that dude. And
Totally.
I don't know what if I have a daughter and I keep telling her, I'm like, I just want sons. I really
Yeah.
I'd
I was
like
the
to.
same way, man. I was the same way. All I wanted was boys. I just wanted to like raise an army. You know what I mean? Like have
Yeah.
all these badass little rough and tumble dudes that just did what I did, and that was like part of the reason I got on this whole kick initially. Is like when I found out I was having a daughter and not a son, I was like, and everybody's like, oh, you're gonna get soft and this and that. You're gonna turn into a big teddy bear, and I'm like, fuck that. Like, I am not getting soft. So I basically, it was like, the David Goggins thing, like, stay hard, get hard. I was like, I'm going to make my life and my lifestyle as rough and as rugged and as tough as possible so that I still have my, my very machismo, ego driven, like exterior, but I could be this soft fucking dude on the inside. You know what I mean? So as funny and as egotistical as that might sound, that was a huge driving point initially.
No, I get
you
that.
know,
I get that 100%. I love that, man. All right,
yeah.
but we'll keep moving forward here.
Sure.
How do you engage in ongoing reflection and personal growth to continuously develop and embody positive character traits as a father? And I think we almost covered this a little bit.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's it's. I'm sorry, man. I'm trying to reread the question. My bad. Engage in ongoing reflection. So, I mean, something I started doing this past year that I never did before is journaling and visualization. So I would take a couple minutes out of the day, whether it's first thing in the morning while I'm having my coffee before I jet out to the gym. That's when I usually try to do it, like set the tone, set the image for my day. Or if it has to happen later in the evening when everything's slowing down. But I basically just have to take that period of time and focus on what I'm working towards, where I can improve, and basically be very honest with myself with, you know, hey, like these are the things I need to do today. These are the things I want to do today, in a sense, and just trying to bring that bigger vision in. And what it does is it helps me stay focused on some of the small things that I'll usually overlook. And it basically boils down to segmenting or structuring out time. Like, hey, so 8 to 10, I'm going to focus on this. 11 to 12 or 11 to 1, I'm going to do that. But being clear and concise with what you're trying to do with your day or with your time, whether it's that day specifically or week or month, and just being repetitively reminding yourself of what you're working towards and what you want to do has been super helpful. And I know it sounds like very small and elementary, but it's massive. And I tell my clients the same thing, and it doesn't always boil down to character type stuff, but it's taking that time to re-identify your why. Like, what are you doing? What are you after? What is your goal? And I tell my clients, I'm like, you have to build this target, and you have to either write it or speak it into existence, or just think about it for a period of time. Because if you don't have a target, if you don't build a target, you can't hit it, you know. So you have to be clear and concise and definitive with what you're working on and why you're here. Whether it's your character or fitness or health or finance, just being trying to be spot on and precise with your movements and your time.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm just going to add on to this again, because I believe reflection is one of the most important things men need to do, but they don't do. They don't sit back and actually look in the mirror. I say it all the time to men. I'm like, get naked, go to the mirror, look at yourself,
Mhm.
because that's where it starts. And look at yourself. Do you like who you are? Look at your
Yeah.
eyes. Do you like you? I mean, eyes show so much, right? And they always laugh, you know what I'm saying? Because I always tell them, like, get naked, get naked. How many times do you look at yourself naked? Because they
Yeah.
always have this feeling of like insecurity when they're naked. And I
Mm-hmm.
saw this in the military a lot, right? And that was an approach I always took to make them laugh and kind of open that conversation of reflection. And so
Totally.
why would you say it's super important for men to have reflection and to have visualization? And what kind of visualization should they approach with? Is it a big target, kind of like Andy Frisella always talks about, dream big? Your visualizations need to be huge. Don't believe
Mm-hmm.
what the universe is telling you or what people are telling you. Believe what the universe is saying is possible. Or should they visualize small little micro steps to get up there? How would you recommend that?
I mean, starting off with reflection, I mean, reflection is huge because I think as men and as our culture and how we've progressed in society is we've always been like ideas like you're not like no matter what you do, it's never good enough. You know what I mean? Like it's never instead of someone being like, "Hey man, good fucking job." It's always like, "Do more." And while that's good and bad, like people need to sit back and realize how far they've come and what they've accomplished in a short period of time. So it's good to reflect on that because a lot of people get so caught up in where they're trying to go, like as far as their goal or they forget how far they've came already. So it's good to reflect on that. And as far as goal setting, man, I totally agree. You know, like, yes, have big, scary goals. Like, you know, put something down there that just seems like almost completely unrealistic because that's another thing that I've learned this last year is dude, and I know it's been said time and time again throughout history, but actually being able to experience it and practice it is the only limitations that we live by are the ones that we set on ourselves. So if you have these crazy unrealistic goals, but you're like, I can do it, you know, I can work at it and having that positive self-talk and the actions to back it up, it's like there's no reason it can't happen. Like I've seen wilder things happen and I've you know even just this last year for me and everything I've done as a man physically and not only that but with other people or for my business or for my family it's like if I didn't start thinking bigger if somebody didn't tell me like bro you can go out and make 150K a month you can go out and change a bunch of people's life without riding in the back seat of a fire engine like if I didn't have people telling me these things I probably would have never thought it you know, I would have just stayed in my lane with my fucking blinders on and been like, this is life, this is normal, everything's all good. And it's like everything was not all good. I wasn't making enough money. I wasn't happy with where I was at. I didn't necessarily feel fulfilled. So I had to start setting bigger goals and getting around people who were doing things bigger than I was used to. And that's why I've been so grateful for the relationships and the people that I've developed over this past year, you know, with other coaches or other entrepreneurs or even some of my clients, like just developing relationships with them and the things that they've dealt with and gone through. Because I mean, in a perfect scenario, everybody brings something to the table. You know, we can all learn from each other in some way, shape, or form. But having those big goals are is massively important. But being definitive with even small goals is more important too.
Yeah, I agree with both. Absolutely, 100%. And one thing you made me think of there was everyone supports you while you're coming up until you're bigger than them and you're making more money than them, right? Everyone wants you to succeed until you succeed past them. So it's something that we
Totally.
always need to keep an eye on and keep that visualization still strong when we're losing our friends because it's going to happen, guys. As we become better men, we lose our circle. We lose our intimate circle of friends that we may grew up with or whatever it is, and I heard you touch on that right there. Can you go further into that? Have you changed your entire circle of friends? Do you still have some from the past of your old self? And how do you interact with them still? Is it the new guy that shows up, or is it you let some of that old guy slip in?
I mean, it depends, man. I mean, there's the initial phase basically of me basically focusing 100% on myself and my actions in my life, you know, and severing ties with certain people. Um, it was lonely. Like, you know, the road of personal development and growth is a lonely road because not everybody in your life wants to grow with you. But you realize who really cares for you and who really supports you. And I think that among becoming your own individual is super empowering. You know, you realize that most of these relationships that you thought were your best buddy or your homeboy or whatever you want to call it was built on substance and bad habits, you know, like going to the bar or doing this or chasing chicks. and then like you stop doing that stuff and you're like, fuck, we don't really have anything in common, you know? But it was funny because like that first, like I said, that first initial period, like, yeah, I was pretty lonely. I pretty much had to remove myself from most of the people that I'd hung out with and had close relationships with because I wasn't strong enough to basically deter from my old habits. So I had to like seclude myself until I built up enough strength and enough discipline to where I could basically reintroduce these people into my life or go to these places and be like, I'm good, dude. I don't need a drink, or I don't want to eat that, or I'm not tempted. But now, like with the success that I've built and like the man that I've built, I'm getting a lot of these guys who were once like, well, what the fuck you doing? And now they're like, how do I do it? And I'm like, come on in, man. I got you. So I got like a bunch of my buddies and stuff that were, in that path and on that road. And now they're straightening it up because they saw me walk it for so long and they want in. And that's the idea is I didn't have to beat down their door and tell them, you're doing it wrong. You're not living right. They just saw my constant action and the results that I produced through constant action and discipline and changing a few things in my life. And it's contagious. People want it. After a while, they're going to be like, all right, what do I need to do? Where do I sign up? Who do I pay? And then they're on board. And that's the greatest feeling too, is like the people that, were always like, well, what's he going to do next? And now they're like, I want in. I get a lot of joy out of that.
I can imagine, and I'll be there one day with my family. I hope. Um, but I know we need to wrap this up a little bit, so I'm going to jump a couple questions here.
Go
One
ahead.
thing for guys to go leave today, what is one action that they can take to start improving their lives right now?
I think the answer's in the question, man. Just take action. You have to do something. Like your life and your situation is not going to change unless you do something to change it. And no one is going to come and do it for you. So you have to step out and you have to do something. And these things that everybody wants in life, whether it's getting healthy, getting fit, making more money, getting a better job, it takes sacrifice in some way, shape, or form. So you have to be willing to sacrifice. You have to be willing to take action. It's going to be uncomfortable, but you're going to look back in a couple of months or a couple of years and be like, man, I'm so glad I fucking jumped up and started doing something, you know. And I'd say along with that, my biggest thing is try to team up with somebody who has similar goals or someone who's in life doing considerably better than you are, because if you are the big fish in the small pond, you are not going to grow anymore. And this is all about growth. You have to put yourself around people who stimulate growth and change in your life.
And I love that action, mentorship. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
these are two big ones, right? Action and mentorship. People just aren't taking action. They're so okay with just the norm. Hey, this is it. This is what I was working for. I got my degree. I got the job that my degree gets me, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And they never push. So I absolutely agree. Action, and anyone out there, find a mentor, man. It helps. Surround yourself with guys who are better than you if you can. They're always going to lift you up. I don't know anyone. I just came into this space and I've met just some of the most amazing men I've met since the military. And in the military, we were looking for the colonels and generals as mentors, the higher
Totally.
ranks. And I came right in, and it's been nothing but, hey, what are you doing? Are you accountable? Right? Someone's holding me accountable. I'm like, shit. And I love it.
Mm-hmm.
And you get addicted to it. You get addicted to having men that are driving forward in your life. And those old guys, you're just like, man, I'm sorry, man. I can't even go back that's so many steps behind me. I can't even go back anymore or look back there. So
Right.
I love it.
Right.
We're gonna get back to one last fatherhood question.
Sure.
What is one of the biggest obstacles you've overcome or challenges you've overcome as a father?
Oh man. I hope we have time for this.
This is the last
um,
question. Last question.
so, so like I said before, my son and me and his mother had always had like an extremely toxic relationship. And we separated when he was roughly 1 years old, but I remained consistent in his life, whatever it took. Going back and forth to Orange County from San Luis Obispo, weekends, all this stuff. And keeping that consistency and being in his life has led to much bigger things. I just recently got full custody. So that has been an absolute blessing, and it's all about basically compounded interest over the past 8 years. Like, yeah, I was in a shitty position. I was not probably a great father, but I was there. I made the change. I knew where I needed to change, and I did something about it. And then I basically was presented with an opportunity that probably would have never presented itself had I continued to live a certain way. And I got it because I took my life and myself seriously, because my kids meant more to me than the things that I was pursuing at that time. So, I mean, to any father that's going through any sort of, I know the split custody, the battles, whatever, this and that. It's a rugged ass battle, but I mean, just do what you can to stay in the fight and always stay through, because I mean, your kid needs you. If I didn't step up and take action when I did recently, like, it would be a much different scenario. So I just I just urge anybody who's dealing with anything in that nature, because I know it's super common, to just stay in the fight and don't give up, and whatever it takes to just be present or be regular, in your child's life, it's going to make all the difference one day.
Yeah, Brad, that's powerful, man. That really is. Co-parenting is not an easy task, especially if it's in conditions that are not ideal for a lot of us. So congrats on getting custody. That's absolutely huge. And it just shows how much work men can really put in and overcome and win. I mean, that's a huge, huge win. You had to stack how many wins to get that big, big win, right? And
Years,
yeah.
years.
Love the process, right? Because that's we're stuck in the process for life. And man, I appreciate you so much for coming on here and giving everyone some insight and some knowledge. Thank you so much. How can anyone contact you or follow you? And what's your social medias?
Yeah, of course, man. So probably the best place to get a hold of me is my Instagram, reliant.fitness. I'm on all major platforms: Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, even. But yeah, Instagram's the best place to get a hold of me, as far as if you're reaching out and you just want some advice, or you're interested in working with me on a program. So at reliant.fitness on IG.
Awesome. Guys, hit him up and you have to follow his Instagram. He's putting out amazing content. Brad, thanks again.
Thank you.
Take care, brother.
Appreciate you, man. It's been